Long before humanity spread across the stars, they were still learning how to survive outside their own system. The first colonies were fragile, the first ships were slow, and the dangers of deep space were unknown. One such danger struck the ship Endeavour, a small exploration vessel that had traveled far beyond the safe lines of supply. The Endeavour carried a crew of 30. They were not soldiers or conquerors. They were scientists, engineers, and dreamers. Their mission was simple: map distant regions and record whatever life or resources they discovered. For weeks, the journey went smoothly. Then, in the silence of an empty sector, disaster struck. A burst of radiation from an unstable star tore through the ship's shields. Systems went dark, engines failed, and the small crew faced the prospect of slow death in the void. The captain, a quiet man named Ryan, refused to give up. He ordered distress signals to be sent into the unknown, even though no one believed help would come. Humanity had not yet met many neighbors, and the chances of someone hearing the call were close to none. Still, the signal repeated, a voice of hope echoing across the black sea of space. When rescue arrived, it did not come from Earth. It came from a race few humans had ever heard of, the Thrix. The Thrix were small insect-like beings with fragile wings and bright compound eyes. They were not strong, not mighty, and certainly not an empire. They were wanderers, moving from system to system in nomadic fleets, harvesting what they needed to live. When they found the Endeavour, they could have ignored it. Many larger species might have done so, unwilling to waste fuel or effort on strangers. Yet the Thrix chose to act. Their ships latched onto the broken vessel. Their engineers, though different in form and tools, worked with patience and care. For days they shared air, food, and warmth. The humans and Thrix could barely communicate, but kindness spoke louder than words. The humans saw the way the Thrix cared for one another, how they refused to leave even a single injured crew member behind. In turn, the humans offered what little knowledge they had, showing the Thrix how to stabilize energy relays and shield their own ships more efficiently. At last, the Endeavour was repaired enough to limp back toward friendly space. Before the two groups parted, the captain of the Endeavour stood before the Thrix leader. He placed a hand over his chest, the ancient human gesture of promise. Through translators that worked only in fragments, he said, "We owe you. Humanity will remember." The Thrix leader, whose name could not be fully spoken in human tongue, only tilted her small head. She seemed amused, perhaps even doubtful, that such a young species would remember a single act of mercy in the endless march of time. Then the Thrix departed, their ships vanishing into the deep like sparks carried away by the wind. The humans returned home with their lives. True to the captain's word, the story of the Thrix was placed into the archives. Generations passed. Empires rose and fell across the stars. Humanity grew stronger, spreading across worlds and building fleets that dwarfed the small vessels of the past. Yet the record remained. It was not forgotten by all. Among scholars and admirals, the file of the Endeavour was kept alive, a note of a promise, a debt not yet repaid. For the Thrix, life moved differently. They had no vast cities or military power. Their fleets were small, their colonies scattered. To them, the memory of saving the Endeavour was little more than a tale told to children. They did not expect humans to return. They did not believe a mighty people, once risen, would remember a small act performed in the quiet shadows of history. And so the years rolled on. The galaxy spun, full of wars, treaties, and endless change. Humanity marched forward with ambition and curiosity, never forgetting who they were. And somewhere, beyond the borders of known space, the Thrix continued their fragile wandering, unaware that one day the promise made long ago would be fulfilled in ways no one could imagine. What began as a small act of kindness in the cold dark of space would one day shake the galaxy to its very core. The Thrix lived quietly for many generations after their meeting with the humans. They traveled from system to system, never staying in one place for long. Their fleets were small, their needs were simple, and their hearts were gentle. They had no armies, no weapons of fear, and no desire for conquest. For a time, this way of life protected them. But the galaxy was never a safe place for the weak. Far from their wandering roots, a new power rose. It was the Vaer Dominion, an empire built on control and hunger. The Dominion valued strength above all else. They spread like fire across the stars, consuming smaller races, seizing resources, and bending worlds to their will. To them, weakness was not to be pitied but to be used. When the Dominion discovered the Thrix, they saw no friends, only tools. The fleets of the Thrix were fragile. Their ships carried no heavy weapons. Their colonies were unguarded. The Dominion struck swiftly, with fleets larger than anything the Thrix had ever seen. Worlds that once sang with life were silenced. Families were taken, leaders were forced to kneel, and the Thrix way of wandering freedom came to an end. The Thrix fought, but their resistance was small and unorganized. Their wings and light bodies were no match for soldiers in iron armor. Their peaceful ships shattered like glass before the Dominion's warships. Within a single generation, the Thrix were bound in chains of law and labor. The Dominion forced them into service. They became miners on barren worlds, digging metals for ships they would never own. They became farmers on stolen soil, feeding mouths that mocked them. Some were taken into the great cities of the Dominion, where they served as servants and workers, their bright eyes dulled with exhaustion. The songs of the Thrix, once filled with joy, became whispers of sorrow. The Dominion believed they had broken the Thrix completely. To the rulers of the empire, the Thrix were nothing more than another forgotten race, one more thread in the vast web of control. But among the Thrix, stories still lived. Parents told children of a time before chains. They spoke of stars wandered freely and of kindness shown by a species called humans. The children listened, though many thought these were only dreams. After all, no human had come. The promise seemed lost to the winds of time. In truth, the humans had not forgotten. The archives of the endeavor still remained. Scholars and leaders had records of the Thrix, and though centuries passed, the story of the dead was whispered in quiet halls. Yet humanity was busy with its own struggles, with its own growth, and it had not crossed paths with the Thrix again. For the Thrix, hope became a fragile flame, kept alive only in secret songs and quiet prayers. They did not know if the humans still lived, or if they cared. The Dominion laughed at the very idea that anyone would rise for such a small and broken race. To the Dominion, power was eternal, and weakness was a chain that could never be broken. But cracks were already forming. The Dominion ruled with fear, and fear cannot last forever. Other races under their control whispered of rebellion. Trade guilds groaned under unfair taxes. Even among the Dominion's own people, doubt began to spread. They saw the cruelty of their leaders and wondered how long such a path could endure. The Thrix did not see these cracks clearly, but they felt them. In the mines, in the farms, in the hidden corners of forgotten stations, the Thrix still shared their old stories. They remembered the words of the human captain, who promised that one day humanity would return the kindness given. To some, this was only a dream. But to others, it was a light strong enough to keep the spirit alive. One elder spoke often to the young, "The humans are far, but they do not forget. One day, when the stars shift and the winds of fate change, they will return. And when they do, the Dominion will tremble. The young listened. They had no reason to believe, yet something in those words stayed with them. Perhaps it was the way the elder's voice carried hope. Perhaps it was because hope was the only treasure the Dominion could not steal. And so the Thrix endured. They bent under the weight of chains, but they did not break. They worked, they suffered, they wept, but they also remembered. The galaxy may have seen them as small and powerless, yet deep within the heart of their people, a silent strength remained. What they did not know was that their patience was nearing its end. Far away, among the stars, humanity was watching. The promise recorded in the archives was not a story to them. It was a debt, and soon, very soon, that debt would be repaid. The Dominion believed the Thrix were weak forever. They were wrong. For when humans moved to repay what was owed, the galaxy itself would shiver. The galaxy is vast, filled with countless stars and endless silence. Many races rise, and many fall, their names remembered only in old records. Yet among humans, there are those who keep history alive, no matter how small the story may seem. In the great libraries of Earth and the archives of the outer colonies, the record of the Endeavor still rested. It told of a broken ship, a doomed crew, and the small insect-like race that chose mercy over indifference. Generations had passed since then. The humans of that time were explorers with fragile ships. The humans now were very different. They had grown stronger, spreading across hundreds of worlds. Their fleets were vast, their colonies proud, and their voice in the galaxy louder than ever before. Yet even as humanity changed, the old promise remained in the files. Some might have called it a forgotten tale, but to the right ears, it was not forgotten at all. The story began again in a quiet corner of the galaxy. A human exploration fleet, traveling along distant trade routes, came across a convoy of battered ships. Their hulls were marked with the crest of the Vair Dominion, but the slaves inside told a different story. They were Thrix. Their wings were torn, their eyes dim with exhaustion, their voices broken with grief. The Dominion guards treated them as nothing more than tools, unworthy of freedom. The human commander of the fleet, a steady leader named Mara, listened to the Thrix carefully. She learned who they were, what had happened to them, and how their people had once helped humanity long ago. When she returned to her ship, she searched the archives. It took only a few hours to confirm the truth. The records matched. These were the very same people who had saved the Endeavor generations ago. Mara stood in silence as she read the old report. She saw the words of Captain Ryan, the promise he had made, the vow that humanity would never forget the kindness of the Thrix. For a moment, she felt as though the past had reached into the present, tying them together. She knew then that this was no simple mission. This was a debt waiting to be repaid. When the news spread through the fleet, the response was clear. Humanity owed the Thrix, and humans had always kept their word. To abandon them now would be to betray not only the Thrix but their own history. The Dominion did not see it this way. When human envoys approached, demanding the release of Thrix slaves, the Dominion laughed. To them, the Thrix were nothing. Why would a rising species like humanity care for a broken race of wanderers? The Dominion saw the humans as bold but naive. They expected the humans to retreat when mocked, to bow before the power of an empire that had ruled for centuries. But humans did not retreat. They remembered. The first clash came when Dominion patrols tried to take back the Thrix convoy the humans had rescued. The patrol was armed and confident, certain that the humans would hand over the slaves to avoid trouble. Instead, the humans defended the convoy. In a swift and precise strike, the Dominion ships were destroyed. The Thrix, watching from behind, could not believe what they saw. For the first time in generations, someone had fought for them. The news spread quickly. Among the Thrix, whispers of the old promise turned into hope. Parents told their children that the humans had returned. Elders wept, recalling the moment when Captain Ryan promised that humanity would remember. Against all odds, the promise had survived the weight of centuries. For the Dominion, the message was different. Reports of human interference spread through their high councils. They scoffed at first, calling the humans reckless fools. Yet beneath the laughter, unease began to grow. It was not the strength of humanity's fleets alone that concerned them, but the reason behind their actions. Few in the galaxy fought for the weak. Few risked their lives for promises made long ago. The humans were different. Commander Mara's fleet returned with the rescued Thrix, who were given shelter on human colonies. They were treated not as slaves or tools, but as honored guests. The Thrix struggled to believe this kindness was real. Yet everywhere they looked, humans welcomed them. The words "we owe you" were spoken with respect and carried like a shield. The Thrix began to sing again. Their voices, once heavy with sorrow, now carried notes of hope. They sang of a time when kindness given to strangers came back as salvation. They sang of humans who remembered a promise. Their songs spread across the stars, carried by trade ships and travelers. Even those who had never heard of the endeavor now knew that something was stirring. The Dominion, however, could not allow such stories to spread. To them, hope was dangerous. Hope led to rebellion. Hope could shatter chains. They began to prepare their fleets, certain that the humans would learn fear once they faced the full power of the Empire. But they did not understand the humans. The Dominion fought for power, for control, for the pride of their empire. The humans fought for something older, something stronger. They fought for a debt, for honor, for the unbroken word of a captain long dead. And in that difference, the seeds of change were planted. The Vair Dominion had ruled for centuries with an iron grip. Their fleets stretched across countless systems, their banners hung over conquered worlds, and their voice silenced weaker races. To them, no power could rise fast enough to challenge their throne. When humanity demanded the release of the Thrix, the Dominion saw it as nothing more than a bold cry from an ambitious young species. They thought it amusing, even laughable. The High Council of the Dominion met in their grand chamber to discuss the human message. The chamber was filled with towering figures draped in rich armor. Their voices echoed with pride. One spoke, "These humans think they can defy us for the sake of insects. Let them bark. They will learn their place soon enough." Another added, "They are new to the stars. Crush them quickly, and no one else will dare follow their example." With this decision, the Dominion sent a fleet to face humanity. It was not their largest fleet, for they did not believe such strength was needed. To them, it was a lesson, not a war. They expected humans to surrender once they saw the full size of the Dominion's warships. But the humans were waiting. Commander Mara and her fleet had already prepared. She knew the Dominion would never allow the Thrix to go free without resistance. She also knew the promise of humanity was not words alone. It had to be proven in fire and steel. The battle began near a border world, one rich in resources and guarded by a Dominion fortress. The Dominion fleet arrived with banners raised high, their weapons glowing with power. Their commanders sent a message to the humans. "Stand down. Hand over the Thrix, and your people will be spared." Resist, and you will burn. The humans did not stand down. Commander Mara sent her own message in reply. Her voice was calm, steady, and carried across every channel. Humanity remembers. Humanity keeps its word. We will not surrender those who trusted us. We will not bow. With those words, the battle was joined. The Dominion fleet outnumbered the humans. Their warships were larger, their weapons stronger. By all logic, victory should have been easy for them. But the humans did not fight with logic alone. They fought with determination, with creativity, with the stubborn refusal to yield. Human ships moved in patterns the Dominion had never seen. They struck quickly, then vanished into shadows, reappearing where the enemy least expected. Small vessels darted between giant cruisers, targeting weak points the Dominion commanders thought too minor to defend. Precision fire disabled engines and blinded sensors, leaving the mighty ships stumbling in the void. Every time the Dominion pushed forward, the humans adapted. Every trap the Dominion set was turned back against them. What the Dominion saw as chaos was, in truth, careful strategy born of human flexibility. No machine could predict it, no ancient empire could control it. The battle raged for hours. At last, the fortress itself came under human fire. Massive cannons struck the shields, not with brute force but with steady, relentless blows. The shields faltered, cracked, and fell. The fortress shook as human torpedoes pierced its heart. With a roar of fire, the Dominion stronghold that had stood for generations was reduced to ruins. The surviving Dominion ships fled. They had expected an easy victory, but instead they carried home the bitter taste of defeat. News of the battle spread quickly across the stars. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion had been struck, and not by a great empire, but by humans, a people the Council had dismissed as little more than children. The galaxy took notice. Races long crushed by Dominion chains whispered in secret. If humans could stand against the Empire, perhaps others could too. For the Thrix, the battle was more than victory. It was a miracle. They had watched from the safety of human ships, trembling as the Dominion fleet approached. Many believed they would see their new friends destroyed, and chains returned. Instead, they saw the promise fulfilled with fire. They saw humans bleed and fight, not for themselves, but for the Thrix. Their songs rose again, carried on trembling voices that grew stronger with each verse. When Commander Mara returned to her fleet, she stood before her crew. "This is only the beginning," she said. "The Dominion will not forgive this defeat. They will come again, and in greater numbers. But we will not waver. We will not forget why we fight. We do this not for power, but for honor. We do this because humanity remembers." Her words echoed through the ships, carried across every channel, written into every log. It was no longer just about a single promise. It was about the nature of humanity itself. They would not bow to fear. They would not abandon friends. The Dominion had wanted to teach humans a lesson. Instead, they had been taught one. The first blow had been struck, and though the war ahead would be long, the galaxy now understood a truth the Dominion had ignored. Humans were not to be mocked. Humans were not to be underestimated. The stars had seen the fire of their resolve, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Dominion had underestimated humans. They believed that one defeat was a mistake, that a clever fleet or a single commander could not change the balance of power. Yet humans were not only clever, they were relentless, and their purpose was rooted in honor. For the Thrix, the humans' determination became a beacon of hope that had been lost for generations. Commander Mara and her fleet did not stop with the first victory. They moved from system to system, seeking Thrix colonies, rescue points, and Dominion strongholds. Every rescue was a small victory, yet each one sent a message: the chains that had held the Thrix for centuries were not unbreakable. The Thrix themselves began to act. Though small and fragile, they had knowledge of their systems, the secret routes, and hidden supply caches that even the Dominion did not fully control. Guided by human fleets, they sabotaged supply lines, opened gates to trapped worlds, and helped liberate families long held in bondage. One colony, known as Lurian, had been a center of Dominion mining operations. Thousands of Thrix worked tirelessly to extract rare metals for an empire that neither respected nor thanked them. When human fleets arrived, the Dominion forces were confident. They expected resistance, perhaps even surrender, but not the strategy the humans had prepared. Small human vessels darted through the system, disabling communication satellites and blinding Dominion sensors. Larger ships fired precisely at power cores, not with wasteful destruction but with exact strikes that left Dominion weapons offline. Meanwhile, Thrix engineers and scouts, guided by humans, opened locks, shut down energy fields, and freed prisoners in secret. By the time the Dominion realized what had happened, the colony had been reclaimed. The Thrix were free once more, and Dominion forces were retreating in confusion and fear. This victory changed something in the Thrix. They had survived, yes, but they had never believed freedom was possible. Humans had shown them that courage and cleverness could overcome chains. In every liberated world, the Thrix began to sing. Their songs were no longer whispers of sorrow, but shouts of joy that spread across space. Other enslaved races, who had long believed rebellion impossible, heard these songs. For the first time, they dared to hope. The Dominion reacted with anger. They sent massive fleets, determined to crush the humans and restore order. But humans fought differently than any empire had expected. They did not rely on brute force alone. They adapted. They coordinated with the Thrix. They turned the Dominion's own strategies against them. Every fleet the Dominion sent became a lesson in patience and ingenuity. Every battle revealed that humans were not simply strong, they were unpredictable, determined, and impossible to fully anticipate. In one decisive encounter near the Thrix homeworld, human fleets used diversionary tactics to split the Dominion forces. While one group engaged the Dominion in open space, another slipped through unguarded routes and destroyed supply stations critical to the enemy's operations. The Dominion fleet faltered. Without resources, coordination, and morale, even the largest warships could not hold the line. The humans pressed forward, liberating dozens of enslaved Thrix and forcing the Dominion to retreat for the first time in centuries. The Thrix began to see humans in a new light. They were no longer distant figures, recording history in the archives of a long past promise. They were warriors, rescuers, and friends. They had come across the galaxy not for conquest, not for reward, but to repay a debt of honor. And in doing so, they had ignited a spark in the hearts of all the oppressed. Commander Mara spoke to the Thrix elders after the liberation of Lurian. "We did not come to fight for power," she said. "We came to keep a promise. But your courage, your knowledge, and your willingness to act with us, it is what makes freedom possible. The Dominion may have chains, but chains can break." The Thrix wept. For generations, they had been forced to believe that strength alone determined the fate of the galaxy. Now they saw that courage, unity, and honor could change the future. They had been small, weak, and forgotten, yet with the humans by their side, they could stand against the mightiest empire. Word of the victories spread quickly. The Dominion's allies and conquered races watched in fear and wonder. A species once considered minor had shattered chains across multiple worlds. They had proven that not all battles were won by numbers, and not all victories were claimed by empires. Humanity's name spread across star systems, whispered with awe and caution. For the Thrix, the chains of the past had been shattered. For humanity, the debt of honor had been partially repaid, yet the larger challenge remained. The Dominion would not accept defeat quietly. They would return, stronger and more determined. But now, the galaxy had seen a new truth: humans fought not for empire, not for fear, but for what was right. And that truth would change everything. The Dominion had never faced a species like humans before. Their armies were vast, their fleets powerful, and their control absolute. Yet no amount of firepower or strategy had stopped the humans from rescuing the Thrix. Every defeat weighed heavily on the Dominion, not because humans were strong, but because humans refused to bend, to yield, or to forget. Their purpose was simple: keep a promise. As word of human victories spread, the galaxy began to notice. Systems once ruled in silence whispered in fear. Traders, miners, and small colonies shared stories of human fleets striking with precision, freeing enslaved races, and vanishing before the Dominion could respond. The humans were no longer a curiosity, they were a symbol of a new kind of power. Other oppressed races began to take note. Some had long given up hope, believing that resistance was futile. But humans showed that even the smallest, weakest people could challenge empires when they acted with courage and unity. Secret meetings began on hidden worlds, where representatives of different races discussed what they had witnessed. For the first time in decades, they dared to dream of freedom. The Thrix were at the center of this change. They had once been slaves, their voices silenced, their wings broken by years of labor. Now they moved with hope, their songs no longer whispers of sorrow but declarations of resilience. Human fleets had brought more than protection, they had brought inspiration. The Thrix shared stories of humans with other races, describing their strategy, their honor, and their determination. Each story carried a warning to the Dominion: humanity would not be stopped. The Dominion tried to maintain control, but their power had cracks. Governors in distant systems grew nervous. Soldiers who had followed orders without question began to question them. The Dominion's propaganda, once unquestioned, could not erase the truth. Reports of humans freeing enslaved Thrix and other races reached every corner of the empire. Fear began to spread. For humans, the victories were not about glory or conquest. They fought with precision and intelligence, but also with care. Every action was measured, every rescue planned to save lives rather than destroy them. They used their strength to protect the weak, and that made them unpredictable. The Dominion could not anticipate their moves because humans did not fight for themselves, they fought for justice, for honor, for a promise kept across centuries. In one system, a group of enslaved workers secretly sabotaged a Dominion supply station after hearing the news of human victories. They did not know humans were near, but the belief in their return gave them courage. The station's defenses failed, and critical supplies were destroyed, delaying Dominion operations across multiple star systems. Every act of resistance, small or large, became part of the growing storm that humans had begun. Even the Dominion's own allies began to falter. Species that had once pledged loyalty now watched humans with caution. If humans could defy the Dominion to save one small race, what else might they do? Alliances that had seemed unshakable began to show signs of weakness. Fear and uncertainty spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Within human fleets, morale was high. They understood that the Dominion would return, Stronger and more determined, but they also knew something that no empire could measure: the courage of people fighting for hope is stronger than any fleet. Commander Mara reminded her officers, "We are not just rescuing the Thrix. We are showing the galaxy that chains can break, that the weak are not powerless, and that a promise kept can change the course of history." The Thrix themselves grew bold. Where before they had hidden from patrols, now they moved openly with humans at their side. They reclaimed small settlements, repaired ships, and prepared to rebuild their scattered colonies. Humans taught them how to navigate, defend, and strategize without relying solely on strength. Together, they formed a bond that no empire could sever. The Dominion realized too late that fear was no longer in their hands alone. It had shifted to the humans, to the Thrix, and to every oppressed race watching the unfolding events. Fear had become the Dominion's own enemy. They could build fleets, fortresses, and weapons, but they could not erase courage, unity, or the human will to honor a promise. In council chambers across the Dominion, advisors spoke in hushed tones. "This is unlike anything we have seen," said one. "They are not just strong. They are unstoppable in ways we cannot predict." Another added, "If humans continue, more races will rise. Our empire could crumble from within." The galaxy had begun to change. The small acts of courage, the careful planning, and the unwavering honor of humans had created ripples far beyond what anyone had imagined. Even those who had once bowed in silence now dreamed of freedom. The Dominion could only watch, fearful of a storm it had helped create. The Thrix no longer feared chains. Other races no longer feared oppression. And humans, guided by a promise that had traveled centuries, prepared for the next phase of their mission. The galaxy trembled, not because of weapons alone, but because humans had shown that honor, courage, and determination could shake the foundations of even the greatest empire. The promise was no longer just a memory. It was a force, and the stars themselves would feel its power. The Vair Dominion was shaken to its core. Their fleets, once feared across countless systems, had been tested and broken by humans fighting not for power, but for honor. The Empire realized that defeating humans would require more than firepower. They had underestimated what it meant for a species to remember a promise, and for that promise to shape action across generations. Meanwhile, the Thrix began to rebuild. Their colonies, long abandoned or destroyed, were slowly restored with the help of humans. Ships were repaired, homes were reconstructed, and for the first time in generations, the Thrix moved freely across their worlds. Children ran through open fields without fear, and elders watched with tears of relief and gratitude. The songs of the Thrix, once faint and sorrowful, now rang across the skies with joy and hope. Commander Mara and her fleet continued their mission. Every liberated system strengthened the bond between humans and the Thrix. Humans did not seek to govern, claim, or control. They acted with respect and care, teaching the Thrix to defend themselves, navigate their worlds, and rebuild without relying solely on others. The promise that had begun centuries ago was now fulfilled through action and guidance. The Dominion, however, refused to surrender easily. They gathered their remaining fleets, preparing for a final attempt to reclaim lost systems and punish the humans for their defiance. Their strategy relied on intimidation, expecting that the humans would grow tired or fearful when faced with overwhelming numbers. But humans did not fight with fear. They fought with resolve, with creativity, and with the understanding that justice was stronger than any weapon. When the fleets finally met near the outer colonies of the Thrix, the Dominion unleashed their full power. Massive warships blazed across space, and weapons capable of destroying entire cities were brought to bear. Yet the humans were ready. They moved with precision, striking weak points, coordinating with the Thrix, and using every advantage of knowledge, speed, and strategy. The battle was fierce, but humans never wavered. Every strike, every maneuver, every decision was guided by the promise they had carried for generations. The Dominion soon realized that numbers alone could not win. Their fleets were broken, their strategies countered, and their confidence shaken. Humans had done more than defend, they had inspired the Thrix and other oppressed races to act. Resistance now spread across systems under Dominion control, fueled by hope and courage that humans had reignited. At the heart of the conflict, Commander Mara led a decisive strike against the Dominion's Central Command Station. The station, once thought untouchable, fell under human precision. Dominion leaders were forced to retreat and negotiate. For the first time, the Empire recognized that their power was not absolute. When the fighting ended, the humans helped the Thrix reclaim their home world. The ceremony was simple but filled with meaning. Mara spoke to the gathered Thrix and humans alike. "A promise is not just words," she said. "It is a responsibility. Humanity made this promise centuries ago, and we have kept it. Today, the chains of oppression are broken, and freedom has returned to the Thrix. But the lesson is greater than any one race. Courage, honor, and resolve can change the fate of the galaxy." The Thrix leader, once doubtful that humans would return, now bowed her head in gratitude. "Your return has saved us," she said. "Not only from chains, but from despair. You have fulfilled what we thought was impossible. The galaxy will remember this day forever." Word of humanity's actions spread beyond the immediate systems. Other races, long silenced by fear, began to act. Secret colonies rose, small fleets rebelled, and oppression weakened under the weight of courage. The galaxy had seen what humans could do when guided by honor and the memory of a promise. Humans were no longer just a rising species, they were a symbol of hope and strength that even the greatest empire could not ignore. For the Thrix, the debt was fully repaid. The humans had not only freed them, but had shown them a path to rebuild, defend, and flourish. The children of the Thrix would grow in a world where kindness and courage were stronger than fear and oppression. Their people would never forget the humans who kept a promise made long ago. For humanity, the mission was complete, yet its meaning extended far beyond the Thrix. The galaxy had learned a new truth: honor, courage, and the will to act on promises could shake empires. Humans had proved that strength was not only measured by weapons or fleets, but by determination, intelligence, and the refusal to abandon what is right. As the sun rose over the liberated worlds, humans and Thrix stood side by side. The stars above shimmered with new possibilities. A debt had been repaid, but a new era had begun. The galaxy would never again see humanity as weak or insignificant. They had reminded all that promises matter, that courage can overcome fear, and that even the smallest act of honor can ripple across centuries. And so, as the fleets returned to human colonies and the Thrix celebrated their freedom, the galaxy trembled not in fear of destruction, but in awe of a species that remembered, that honored, and that acted with courage. The dawn of a new age had arrived, and the story of humans repaying a debt would be sung across the stars for generations to come.